Okay, so this you did was section case study is when I bought Apple shares after Steve Jobs passed away. Uh, I'm old. Where I remember where I was actually in finance school. I was in Baruch. It was I forget what day and night, but it was like a Thursday night, and the news broke. I remember everyone kind of congregating around desks and in the hallways and stairwells and talking about it. Everyone had an opinion. And, he was a controversial figure, but still, you felt that something changed. The world was a little bit different. Again, you can be a fan, you can be a hater, whatever, but the world was different now that he wasn't there. It was 2011, right? And so iPhone debuted in 2007. So it was 4 or 5 years after. I believe we had the iPad. But it was just a lot of talk that where's Apple going to go? Tim Cook took over. They had Johnny Ives or whatever with design. But I mean, it's hard to imagine now. Most of the talk was that Tim Cook doesn't know what he's doing, that they don't have the design chops, that they don't have the product pipeline anymore, that Steve Jobs was the one keeping that company together. And this was like the talk for a good half a year to a year. And I remember I was living in Hoboken at the time. I went on to the PATH train to go home, and I had a Fortune magazine that I was able to get somewhere for free. I forget where. And one article, I'll try to find it, was just about early Apple investors, people who fell in love with the iMac back in the early 90s or mid 90s, and invested bought some shares, and now they're millionaires just based on their Apple position because of the iPhone and everything. And I remember reading that and being like, man, that's so smart, because they fell in love with this product, and this was a product that I was using. I was at Disney at the time, and so I had my first iPhone. I was using iMacs. Disney and Apple had a close relationship, or they still do, because of the whole Pixar acquisition, where you don't hear about it now, but I remember for the longest time hearing that the largest shareholder in Disney was Steve Jobs' wife. Now you don't hear that much with their whole talk with Nelson Peltz. And anyway, so I had an iPhone. I was a fan of the company, fan of the products, and I had my my IRA accounts. I forget which ones at the time, traditional or Roth, maybe both. And I said, I'm going to take a plunge. And so I bought some Apple shares. I forget when, but of course it was right before they had probably their worst earnings call in the last 15, 20 years. So much so that the stock plummeted. Tim Cook they said he was going to get fired. They had a guy on CNBC saying that it was a broken company, that it's over. And I thought to myself, wow, out of all the great investments that people made in Apple, I've timed this one incredibly wrong. And so I just suffered with it. But the thing is kind of going to the point of the prior lesson, is that it was in my retirement accounts. I said, you know what, let's see where this goes. I'm losing right now, but we have some time. So the point of this case study is that you can be very wrong in the beginning. Timing a stock purchase is, people like to think that they're smart when they get lucky, and sure, I do the same thing. But the score of the game is when you sell it, or when you die or whatever. Now that purchase is one of the best things that I ever did. It was one of my first purchase of outright stock. Again, this was 2012. And I had to suffer a few months of being the dumbest person in the world. I think it was 6 months or so. But then it was April of 2014. I remember My fiance at the time and I were looking at apartments in Miami. First time really down here, and I put on the TV, and Apple had gangbuster results, stock split, repurchases. I think it was the first time they were having a dividend. It was, yeah, I think the stock split 7-1, something like that. And everything in the world seemed right again. So the case study is that there's going to be a lot of negative news. There's going to be a lot of people on TV saying things. Again, Apple being a broken company. Let's think about that for a second. And then there's also the lesson of CEO or founders. We'll talk about that at length at different times. Steve Jobs was a little bit different than, let's say, a dynamic CEO like a Bob Iger, if we're talking about Disney, where he really was. Steve Jobs was really a visionary, and he created the company with Steve Wozniak, or however you say his name. But yeah, it's go with your gut and don't beat yourself up once you're wrong. And if you're wrong for a long period of time and you want to cut your losses, we'll go into times where you do that as well. But yeah, I mean, if you can believe it, that's the thing. I think there's a lot of people seeing this video who couldn't imagine Apple being labeled as negatively and as horribly as they were. And the broken company, Tim Cook was a moron. They're not going to do anything anymore. And yeah, it was a good feeling seeing that call and having those, when you see your total gain or loss in your account and it turns green. It's a good feeling, and we're going to get there with a bunch of stuff. So that's the lesson. Comments, questions, let me know. And yeah, let's see where Apple goes next. All right, that's the episode. Please subscribe, like, and comment any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in a future episode. Log on to Funnance.com to learn more, and let's have fun with finance.